obviously cost efficient to go into an existing structure and rebuild the guts, right? We call it tenant improvement, tenant build outs, but doesn't come without its challenges, right? Oftentimes we're in there, now all of a sudden we've got to upgrade the service, like you said, both water and power most of the time. Most of the time, clinics, outpatient facilities, medical facilities in general require a lot more when it comes to mechanical components, right? So
yeah, usually a 4, 6, or 8, even an 800 amp panel.
Yeah. Typically, that one out in Daytona is an 800 amp panel.
Yeah, same with this space.
Yeah. And, for reference, 800 amp panel on a 9,000 square foot facility, right? Just a ton of power.
Right. And these shopping plazas are not built with that in mind. They're usually subdivided into 8 or 10 or 12 smaller units that maybe have a 2 or a 250 amp panel.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Most of the time we're, in some of the smallers, we're 100 amp panel trying to figure it out. And it's, it's a challenge for sure. But, like we always say, without the problems, we'd be out of a job. So I welcome the issues that have solutions.
Yeah, my one of my mentors always says it's you say yes and then you figure it out later.
Yeah. Build the parachute on the way down.
That's right. Hopefully you have the materials for it. Welcome to another episode of Blueprints to Punch List, where we're having conversations about healthcare facilities, everything from construction, real estate, and development. And today we have another solo episode with my co-host Ken Fulmer. And we're just going to answer some more frequently asked questions that we see on a day-to-day basis. So, Ken, welcome to another episode. How's it going?
Oh man, it's going. It's been a rough week with some of the projects, but working through it and almost to the finish line with a few. As you know, they always get challenging at that point in time. But it's been good.
What's going on?
Just some curveballs from we've got a project out in Daytona. A little bit of a unique situation. It's a ground up building, but existing footings, existing slab that we're working on.
That was a building that burnt down a couple years ago, right?
Yeah, a couple of years ago. I think 4 years ago now it burnt down just before we were going to do the interior build out. So now we're building the shell.
I remember that project.
Yeah.
Because I was actually the last one.
In the building.
In the building. Well, from Wilson's perspective.
Yeah.
It was Thanksgiving. It was the day before Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going there. We're doing an asbestos survey. So I met the guy who was doing the asbestos survey. We walked the building, got what we got done. And then the day after Thanksgiving, we got a call that the building, there's a fire and the building had burnt down. And just at that point, I was freaking out.
You and me both, man. I woke up on Thanksgiving and read the article and saw the, flames, saw the building, and I was like, wait, what did we do? But luckily, fire marshal did their due diligence, their investigation. They found out it was just an electrical fire due to old breakers, old panels. So luckily nobody was hurt. And it was empty. And hindsight's 2020, right? Thinking, all right, we keep the footings, we keep the slab, we'll get some grace on some things. That did not happen. So mostly utilities were the curveball there, civil related items.
Utilities are always a curveball. I'm working on something right now where it's we need to update the utilities at this old shopping plaza because there's a main meter that's for the entire space, which is what our client is paying that. And then it's also sub-metered, so the individual tenants are also paying the utility company.
It's a mess, right?
Yeah.
We see it all too often too. I mean, obviously cost efficient to go into an existing structure and rebuild the guts, right? We call it tenant improvement, tenant build outs, but doesn't come without its challenges, right? Oftentimes we're in there. Now all of a sudden we've got to upgrade the service, like you said, both water and power most of the time. Most of the time, clinics, outpatient facilities, medical facilities in general require a lot more when it comes to mechanical components, right? So,
yeah, usually a 4, 6, or 8, even an 800 amp panel.
Yeah. Typically, that one out in Daytona is an 800 amp panel.
Yeah, same with this space.
Yeah. And, for reference, 800 amp panel on a 9,000 square foot facility, right? Just a ton of power.
Right. And these shopping plazas are not built with that in mind. They're usually subdivided into 8 or 10 or 12 smaller units that maybe have a 2 or a 250 amp panel.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Most of the time we're, in some of the smallers, we're 100 amp panel trying to figure it out. And it's, it's a challenge for sure. But, like we always say, without the problems, we'd be out of a job. So I welcome the issues that have solutions.
Yeah, my one of my mentors always says it's you say yes and then you figure it out later.
Yeah. Build the parachute on the way down.
That's right. Hopefully you have the materials for it. But yeah, that's an often the case where we do have to go in there and they give us the green light and then you figure out all the problems.
Yeah. It's always fun
along the way. But problems are, and I tell my kids this, problems are and failure specifically, like when you fail and you hit a roadblock, it's all about how you frame that and not necessarily just that it's a problem or I failed. It's feedback.
Right.
Just how like a win or a successful thing, it's feedback. And you reframe that, then it becomes a whole different conversation and you think about it differently as opposed to having that be just, oh my gosh, I got another problem. What am I going to do here?
Right.
It's like, no, we learned something. Let's figure out how to go about adjusting and make sure either we learn from it or grow from it or have some way to adjust in the future.
Yeah. Hopefully both, right? Like, technically failures don't exist if you learn and grow from it. It's just an opportunity. You know what I mean? And it's we get a lot of those opportunities in this business.
Very blessed in the construction industry to have plenty of those problems.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. But yeah, no, working through it and moving along.
Right on.
Yeah. How about you?
Lots of good stuff happening, personal and business wise. On the business end, we're working through a couple of build outs. Very thankful to have good clients who trust us with what we do and have the projects, to be able to not only take care of them on the front end in their initial construction process, but on the back end later on, seeing the challenges that they face. And I think they appreciate that. And I think that's how it's just good customer service.
Right. You kind of don't figure out a space until you're 6 months into it, right? If the GC takes off and leaves you hanging. Typically there's a 1-year warranty on all our stuff, right? It's typical. Most GCs, all GCs are really going to provide that, right? But being that partner in their transition while they occupy and function within the facility, I think makes a big difference. And, shown with, you get a ton of repeat work, I think as a result of that, obviously the process going through, but also that, the aftermath.
Yeah. It's communication, making sure that we're keeping our clients, our vendors, everybody up to speed. And I do have a little bit of an issue with a fence that recently got replaced. And turns out it was the wrong section that was replaced. So there's another problem to learn from. So yeah, it's keeping us busy. And then travel is ramping up too. We got a couple of conferences, and both work conferences and then personal travel, and also I just hired a personal trainer.
Okay, nice.
So
how's that going?
We're starting probably next week. So
Okay,
we just got everything finalized and figured out who that was going to be.
very cool.
So
Tough process.
Was that
Tough process, or was it fairly easy to find somebody that?
Well, it's not a big list.
Yeah,
because I was looking for somebody who's also vegan.
Got it.
So
it narrows it down a little bit.
That eliminates 90% of the trainers here in Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
But and also somebody who has the mindset that I like, and I think I found him. So we'll see how that's gonna go.
Very cool. Keep us posted.
Will do.
Awesome.
So yeah, but today we wanted to jump into some Q&A. We had another episode with some questions, and just figure we keep it rolling.
Yeah.
There's plenty of questions in the world that we are in. So why don't we just jump right in?
Cool. Let's do it.
All right. So this one, the first one is when owners or providers come to us and they want a budget,
mm-hmm.
but oftentimes they don't have drawings.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't settled on the space. So what we're the term that we use for this is a ROM budget, a rough order of magnitude. So can you go into a little bit more detail on what is a ROM budget?
Yeah. So a ROM budget, rough order of magnitude, it's really just putting together some pricing for typically budgetary conversations, right? A lot of our clients are, large corporations, national corporations that do plan their budgeting and expense, do in advance, well in advance, do plan their capital expenses thoroughly. So a lot of, it's kind of that cart before the horse conversation, right? In order to do that, you need to understand roughly what is that project going to cost, which is tough to do without plans, right? There's a lot of intricate details that could be involved to swing the numbers one way or the other. We do it a lot for clients, right? We based it obviously off of historical data, recent historical data that we have, our understanding of what the project's going to be, and our understanding of the program for the client, right? Most of our clients have a certain program, so we understand what finishes are going in there and what it kind of looks like. So we're able to put the ROM budgets together fairly quickly, get them what they need to make their decisions. One thing I always say about ROM budgets is depending on where in the process you're requesting a ROM budget kind of fluctuates or changes the swing that you would experience, right? Early on, you very well may have a 15 to 20% swing one way or the other. Hopefully
that could be huge.
Absolutely. You're talking, a few $1 million, 20%, 15% is big. Obviously the more information we have, the better we can nail it down. And the more we're involved in that process also, right? We can provide a ROM budget. And when you have 50% drawings, or when we're at 50% drawings, we can kind of dial it in. 90% we can really, really dial it in, especially with the program work because we know their finishes. But you're going to have those swings the earlier on you're trying to get them. For us, our goal is always to give our clients enough information to act and not kind of hamstring them later on, right? So we're always going to kind of go, when we're talking ROM budgets, you're typically going to see ROM budgets on the higher end of what you're going to spend on that project, but it is accounting for somewhat worst case scenario, or should be at least.
Yeah, and it makes a difference if it is a national client who has a program and who has a spec book and they know what they're looking for, versus somebody who's a single office practitioner client and they have no idea.
Yeah.
So they might have some thoughts on what they're looking for, but they don't know if they're going to want solid surface countertops.
Yep.
The exam rooms, what is that going to look like? Cabinets, and it does come back to the cost, because all that adds or takes away.
Yeah, and I mean, really, obviously the big components are, your structure, your MEP, your steel. Those are the big components, but and we can typically understand and account for those when we know what they're looking for, right? We've got to know what how much power they need there. We got to know how much water they need there. Are they doing flush valve toilets? Are they doing tank type toilets? That'll dictate some of that. So we need some information, but to your point, like even finishes can cause a big swing in things, right? You can one material for your millwork, for your cabinetry or your countertops, could cost you, $50,000 for your space, right? And all of a sudden you change it to a solid surface and more of this different color or pattern you like on the laminate, and all of a sudden you're talking $120,000 for your millwork, right? So even down to the finishes can swing those numbers significantly.
And the beauty of and why we're able to provide these rough order of magnitude estimates, these ROM budgets, is because of the historical data.
Yeah,
doing a bunch of these outpatient clinics, primary care type clinics, smaller medical facilities. You have the data, right? So we know, okay, if you're going to have eight exam rooms versus 10 or 6 versus 12, like you just know what those costs are. And sometimes, it's challenging. I find it on the smaller clinics because you don't have, like, if it's a 2,000 or 2,500 square foot space versus a 10,000 square foot space, the numbers just don't always translate down evenly or multiply up. So there's a lot, because if you need a panel upgrade, you're going to need it for the smaller, and it's the smaller or the big, and it's the same.
Yeah. You feel it more on those smaller projects, right? And all of a sudden you're talking on a $5 million project, if it swings up, $100,000, relatively a drop in the bucket, right? It's talking about a $250,000, small occupied refresh type project, and all of a sudden it swings 100. That's a big difference. So I think you feel it a lot more on those smaller projects, certainly.
Yeah. And having the understanding of, okay, maybe they're not looking to do a full gut. They just want to redo the finishes, or they want to add a couple of exam rooms to an existing space. What those numbers look like, and again, having the repetition of doing this all day long and having our historical data with our estimating team makes a big difference. And the other thing too is, I think worth mentioning, is the time frame, right? So it doesn't take 2, 3, 4 weeks to get this together. Sometimes our guys can get it out in a matter of a couple of days. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Especially when we're working with, folks that we're familiar with, and we know we can kind of understand, all right, this guy's going to fall here, here, and here. Obviously, we pull all our bids in, we review them, and we make the best decision for the project. But we are able to, I think, uniquely able to kind of provide those ROM budgets when you're talking about projects within our territory that are your primary care facilities, those things that we do, dozens of on a yearly basis, right? And we like, it's not like we're going and sending an invoice for this ROM budget, right? We're typically providing ROM budgets for clients we work with. Sometimes those projects come to fruition, sometimes they don't. Ultimately, for us, it's beneficial for the relationship, and it also brings us in earlier on in the process, right? So if we can get in there earlier on in the process, here's a ROM budget. Okay, does this blow out of the water what you guys were thinking? Does it not? If it does, all right, well, let's look at what's driving that cost. And we can't always do that up front, right? We can't understand it because it's just a rough order of magnitude, rough numbers. But as they nail down the scope and as we understand the space, we can really sharpen the pencil there and kind of understand what their absolute needs are, and then understand what we can pull from that to save money.
Yeah. So in short, what I'm hearing is the ROM budgets have they're free estimates, so there's no charge for it. It could take a short amount of time to turn around, sometimes a couple of days, sometimes a week or so. And then it's based on historical data.
Yep.
So we can provide not just a guess, while it is in a way a guess, it's a educated guess based on having the historical data and that information in what we've done in the past. So
Yeah,
super
absolutely.
helpful.
Yeah. And obviously it's easier with the program work. We can get a little more dialed in earlier on in the process. But because of all the information we have, we can get real close on just about anything medical related. But again, got to be reasonable and understanding on those are, based on certain finishes, certain materials, certain situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What's the next question?
Yeah. So, warranties, guarantees. As a general contractor, do we offer any guarantees of our work? Do we offer any sort of warranties? And if, what do those look like?
No.
Yeah. You're on your own.
Yeah, you're on your own. No, I think you mentioned this earlier when we started the podcast. There's always warranties, and typically 1 year labor is standard for when you have substantial completion, and 1 year out is the warranty of the project for the craftsmanship, the labor, and then certain components, materials will have longer warranties, like an AC compressor will have often a 5-year warranty or potentially even longer depending on the manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
But each component will have its own unique warranty, but that's usually at least a year. And that's just, again, that's what we hand the client at the end of the project. Okay, this is our warranty here. But really, the guarantee is that we're going to stand behind what we built.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be there with you from start to finish and beyond. And that's what I think makes it so that you can't just walk away from a project. To me, it'd be nice sometimes.
Sure.
But reality is you build a new building and sometimes they're not perfect.
Yeah.
Things come up that, you just have issues that maybe it's the toilets, right?
Mm-hmm.
A flush valve goes out. So what happens if it's on, 1 year and 1 week?
Sure.
Do you just say nope? So we do work with our clients on those scenarios, and we do want to make sure we're staying front and center to help them through the issues that they face, especially when it is a national client. Then they're not headquartered right by their facility. They're not in another state.
Yeah. Halfway across the country.
They want to know that they can call their partners in construction and they're going to help them through the issues and be a problem solver.
Right. We can never promise perfection, but what we can guarantee is we'll answer the phone call. We'll be there. I can't tell you how many times I've been out doing warranty calls and stuff well past our 1 year warranty, right? The fact of the matter is if something's awry or amiss and we had something to do with it, we should be responsible for it, right? Regardless of the 1 year warranty or not. And that's how we try to approach clients. Tell me about, you had mentioned different equipment and stuff. So it's not just our warranty involved in that whole process.
Yeah. So it's all of the subcontractors, all of the vendors, everybody who touches or has a part in that project, even the company who installs the toilet accessories,
mm-hmm.
right? There's still a workmanship. If that bar falls off the wall because it wasn't fastened correctly, then it comes back to, okay, who's going to fix it? So we do rely heavily on our trade partners, which is, again, it goes back to the relationship. So yes, we have the relationship with the client, but you also have to have good relationship with your subs and vendors who help to, who are just as involved
mm-hmm.
in the process as you are. And their warranties are similar. They will, it's usually a 1 year
workmanship, right? So we're just talking about the actual install.
Correct. Yeah. Workmanship. And again, finding the same partners who have the same mentality as you, who are going to stand behind their product and not show up. And we'll answer their calls and we'll show up when there's an issue and not walk away from that problem.
Yeah, that's big, because then all of a sudden you got to bring somebody else in to fix it, and it's like now you're pointing fingers. Like
Exactly.
Something else goes wrong. Now all of a sudden it voids the other folks' warranty, and then it's never fun.
Yeah, which one interesting scenario that comes up often is owner purchased equipment, right? So that means when they might have a national account with a lighting vendor, for example, and they have a preferred pricing for their fixtures, which is great because they get a discount on when they buy, tens of thousands of light fixtures every year. Problem becomes then is who's going to warranty the fixture, right? So now you have an electrician that installs it. You have a lighting vendor who provided it, but it becomes, should the electrician then cover the warranty on the light fixture that they didn't put in? Or they put it in, but now they didn't buy it and provide it. So now they have to go through some hoops. We have to go through some hoops. So there is definitely intricacies there to think about.
Yeah. And then you can get in the situation, right? Say there's a dozen lights and the drivers are bad. Now all of a sudden, why are they bad? Was it an install error? Was it a manufacturing error? Who's going to warranty that? Who's going to handle it? It certainly creates some issues.
Yeah, and when it comes to handling those, I think most electricians that deal with those kind of situations, their pricing will be higher because they have to figure in for some of those trips that are not necessarily their problem, or they're not necessarily something that they purchased that they're responsible for directly, but in a way they're still the ones that have to go back and fix it. Yeah.
So ultimately at the end of the day, the warranty is a piece of paper. It's really you got to make sure you're partnering with the right folks to be able to take care of those things if and when they come up.
For sure.
Yeah. And the manufacturer's warranties are kind of all over the place, right? 5, 10, 20 years. But if you read the fine print, it's got to be an act of God to actually warranty it.
It's who's going to stand behind their product. And that's what gets lost in some of these conversations of trying to get the best price and cost, which is understandable. But when you're getting the best cost, you're not always getting the companies that will have your best interest.
Usually a give take there.
Yeah.
You're going to pay more for what you want.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right, you want to do one more?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So this pops up quite a bit is commercial construction is when somebody has built a house and now they're trying to build a business or a healthcare facility, or they always think it's the same process. So why are commercial contractors different, and the way their pricing is different? And it's just residential and commercial. While there is similarities, you're still ultimately building something. There's some huge differences there. What are some of those differences?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I guess you can, if you simplify it, there are a lot of parallels, right? It's construction, it's building. Now, the construction is usually very different, right? You can stick frame a residential house here in Florida. You'd be hard pressed to, build a commercial building, say a shopping center, with stick framing, right? Typically see TPO roofing on the commercial buildings, whereas you have shingles on the residential. So just from a building standpoint, there's differences in which drive the cost, right? Your mechanical components, your electrical components, your plumbing components, you just need a lot more there. But even more so, it's really the regulations surrounding commercial. In a residential space, yes, you and your family are living in there, but you're not inviting the general public, right? So there's not quote unquote public safety concerns and boxes that the city necessarily wants to check, right? They're not going to let you build something that's unsafe, uninhabitable, but the regulations are, in my experience, a lot less for residential than they are commercial. Because of those regulations, you typically get higher prices because the folks that you're hiring, A, know those regulations, and they are hoops and they are challenges, but B, have the right people in the right places to execute on the work. A lot of times, your residential subcontractors are smaller outfits. They very well may do great work, just the same work. It's just smaller outfits, meaning smaller overhead, less paperwork. When you go down to the billings of residential versus commercial, right? We're not talking about billings at the moment, but the process involved in getting paid from a homeowner versus a business on a commercial project is a lot more difficult. I mean, there's often times that we're not seeing payment on work completed until 60 to 90 days from that point, right? The pay applications, the schedule of values, the different, which you have to go through on residential, but in my experience, not under as much of a microscope in that process. And typically your payment terms are net 30, if that. So there's just a lot of different nuances. I think ultimately it comes down to regulation, and the regulation surrounding commercial versus residential is what requires, or what kind of drives that cost.
Yeah. And there in Florida, I'm not sure if the other states are like this too, but there's a different building code book for residential and commercial.
Yeah. Right. And I think that goes back to, right, public safety. They're more concerned about public safety in a commercial space than they are in a residential space, right? And so they view it differently, and therefore the code is different, right? You have your residential code and your commercial code. And then you have your energy and your existing building and stuff that have interweave with one another. But ultimately, the governing force on both of those is commercial and residential.
Yeah, and typically, like you said, life safety, but also ADA, I would throw out there is less
point.
prevalent. You don't need to make your house wheelchair accessible.
Right.
You don't need to have an elevator
right.
for second-story buildings.
Right. And it's the
2-story buildings.
Weird things, right? It's the strange things. It's the things that until you go through the process, you don't really think about, right? Hire a residential contractor for your commercial space. And maybe they know, maybe they don't, but it's not typical or it's not required in residential. But something as small as what side the actual flush handle is on that toilet, right? You can be anywhere in a residential space. In a commercial space, you have to be off the wall. You have to be on the other side, right? There's different nuances that they look at that just drive the cost. You don't need a bunch of grab bars in your restroom at your house. However, in a commercial space, you need the grab bars. And then space-wise, right? You're talking clearances now all of a sudden. Clear turning radiuses, ADA compliance, right? Now you need more space in your restroom. You need a larger restroom than you would in a residential house because ADA requirements. That's a big one. ADA is a big one.
Yeah. So those are all great points, and there's a lot of GCs that do a great job of crossing over, but it is just understanding that there is some nuances and why some of those costs are going to be more if you've never built a commercial space before and only had done residential type projects. So
yeah, awesome,
man. Well, I think that's all we got for today.
Okay.
Keep it short and sweet, but covered a lot. So keep your questions coming, and we will answer them as we're getting them. And we'll see you next time on Blueprints to Punch List.
Cool. See ya.